All right, so jumping into the next panel, this networking was sponsored by Shopify, just to let you know. Shopify has European roots, but is a Canadian company, a very well-known company. And now we're jumping into the energy and security panel, which could be very interesting. So I invite the moderator and the conference speakers to be on stage.
Hi there. So we're heading into now the energy panel, which I hope you'll find very interesting. We have some really excellent panelists here. My name is Kim Mackreal. I'm a journalist with the Wall Street Journal newspaper, based in Brussels. I cover policy issues, including energy. And with us today, to my left, we have Jorge Gomez, who is the head of optimization and special projects in the industrial division for Repsol, which is an energy company that's based in Madrid. And Jorge is currently leading the company's LNG export initiative in St. John, New Brunswick, which we may hear a little bit more about. And then we've got Bénédicte Bergeaud, who's in charge of public affairs in Europe for Toronto-based renewable energy producer Northland Power. And Denis Dumont, who is the CEO of Tractebel Belgium, an international engineering company that's based in Belgium and offers consulting and engineering services. So I think with that, we will dive right into to a bit of a conversation here, and we'll hope to try to leave enough time also for a couple of questions from the audience at the end. So if you do have questions, feel free to think of those. So Jorge, I thought I would start with you. Repsol is looking at building out LNG export facilities in Atlantic Canada. And I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about why the company's interested in that right now, and if the crisis that Europe is facing in terms of energy right now is playing into that decision.
Yeah, the short answer is yes, and thank you very much. So yeah, in Repsol we hold a regasification terminal in St. John. So it's up and running since 2009. It's in the eastern part of the country, and is basically conceived to receive LNG imports, regasify and serve the Atlantic Canada markets and New England. So now we are seriously considering to adapt into this regasification business with liquefaction. That means exporting LNG from Canada to Europe. So this is something that we've been considering for a while, and definitely we think we have some advantages because of being in the east part of the country. We are closer to Europe. We would be developing a brownfield project, meaning that the storage tanks and the jetty that we have in place can be used for that, so that's an advantage. And given the current situation and in Europe, European Union and in general terms European countries are facing a change in their paradigm in terms of gas supply. There are some gas resources which will not longer be available in terms of supplies from Russia. And European Union and Europe in general, as I said, needs to go for additional supplies, which I would say should be diversified. So the domestic production in Europe doesn't seem to be growing in terms of gas. So there's a limited pipeline imports can be increased, but LNG definitely is one of the main sources of supply to fill in the gap from Russian supplies. And I have to add that LNG, being a global business, also provides with the ability, Europe with the ability to diversify their supplies. On the Canadian side, sorry, I'm finishing. On the Canadian side, while Canada has vast gas resources, is a reliable country. My company's been there for a while, and Canada is exporting gas to the US, and then someone mentioned in the previous panel, yes, and US is exporting that through LNG. So I think that Canada can also play a role on the LNG business. Canada is willing to supply energy to Canada's allies here in Europe. It can be through LNG, and obviously it can also be transitioning into hydrogen, which is one of the additional things that we are undertaking in this project. So thank you very much.
And just a quick follow-up on that. You know, Europe is facing a crisis right now and over the next probably couple of years in terms of its natural gas supply. How quickly could potentially, if the LNG facilities do go forward, how quickly could that start supplying Europe?
Yeah, LNG is not easy. LNG projects are complex, complex in terms of capex because of billions of direct investments and billions of commitments. So, and also from a technological perspective, although LNG liquefaction is a well-known technology, it takes time to be developed. So adding up to that the regulations and the permitting, which is required for this kind of projects, and I have to say that we had to go with federal regulations, provincial regulations in Canada, and also in the US, because some of the pipelines which would be feeding our site are running through the US. So commingling all this kind of stuff, it takes, I would say that it would take between 4 or 5 years from now to have a first LNG, which is not bad for the common LNG industry.
Bénédicte, I wanted to ask you about wind farms, and Northland Power has, I think, 3 large offshore wind farms up and running in Europe now. You're looking at others. Why think about wind farms in Europe right now?
So actually we have 3 operating wind farms in the North Sea, 2 in the German North Sea, 1 in the Dutch North Sea. Why the North Sea? Because actually it's a historical market in Europe. The first offshore wind farm was built in Denmark in 1991, so over 30 years ago. And the North Sea has all conditions. This is why we enter the European market via this area. Of course, there are other areas like the Baltic Sea, and this is why we are developing a project in Poland right now. Also around the UK, even if it's not Europe anymore, it's still very linked to it. And we have 2 projects in Scotland. And we hope to look further in the south, so Mediterranean Sea, but it's then going to floating, which is an innovative technology for offshore wind. Floating offshore wind is not mature for now. We are still on fixed bottom, so it will take some time. And why Europe? Actually, one of our VP used to say that doing business in Europe is like doing business in Canada, but with better coffee. I will leave that to you to discuss that. But it's true. Europe has, in general, a stable regulatory framework. It's easy for a Canadian company to do business in Europe. And I can see it actually every day, speaking to different stakeholders, decision makers, associations, peers. Being a Canadian company is a real asset, and especially right now. And yeah, G7 country, NATO member, all that, no geopolitical background, it helps. And I think for Northland Power, it really helps also to be this bridge between mostly Germany, because it's our first market in Europe, and Canada, and especially those days where a lot of European countries are looking back to Canada and how Canada can, as you mentioned, help diversifying our energy mix here in Europe. Not for tomorrow, but in a few years, LNG or hydrogen. Canada can definitely step up and be a very good partner.
Thanks. We're really lucky we've got people who are able to talk about and represent different parts of the energy sector and different types of energy production. So We get to move on to Denis here, who is with Tractebel and will help us understand a little bit more, I think, about small modular reactors, which, Denis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of as sort of smaller versions of a big nuclear plant that can be potentially assembled a little bit faster and for less money. But can you explain why you see SMRs as, or small modular reactors as an important part of the energy mix for Europe?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm very, very glad to be with you today. So small modular reactors, 3 letters, small, standardized, and simple. So this is clearly a big disruption compared to what you think about nuclear, complexity, radioactive, etc. So small modular reactors, according to us, and we published during the COVID what we call the white paper that where we were investigating as an engineering company the combination between renewable, small modular reactors, gas and hydrogen. So with my colleagues, we are very complementary, not in opposition. And our conclusion was that there is a lot of complementarity between the 4 technologies. And the small modular reactors, when published this paper, Canadian, and thanks to Diane Cameron, we published the same paper at the same date with the same conclusions. And this was published by Canada, by the way. Since then, we opened our office there. And Canada would like to build in 4 regions of Canada, around more than 10 small modular reactors. Regions are well known. Ontario is starting with the first by 2028. They will be on the grid with OPG. Alberta, New Brunswick, and Saskatchewan, the 4 regions are pushing a lot those small modular reactors, combined with hydrogen, as I said, and gas renewable to complete the system. Why is it important to make the connection between what you're doing in Canada, the place to be in that world, with Europe? Is that SMRs in Europe is the big game changer that could bring a solution to the global ecosystem of energy in Europe. And we think, according to our knowledge as an engineering company, so we are completely apolitic. We are engineers, purely engineers, and we think that clearly combining this technology with hydrogen, with gas, and with renewable is the key solution for our problems. It's simple, it's standardized, it's a technology which is proven, and by the way, full fail-safe. So in case of accident, no issue. So this is, according to us, let's say, something on which we count on Europe, but on which we have to also to convince all the stakeholders that nuclear is not only a problem, but also a solution for the problematic that we are facing today. And to manage this, we need to be with the first project in Darlington, to be on time, on CapEx, on scope, as from D1. And this is something on which we are working hard with our colleagues in Canada and in Europe.
Thanks so much. I'd like to open up the next question to all 3 of you, and feel free to treat it as you will. But in the context right now of the energy crisis that Europe and the world are facing, and also the COP climate conference is happening right now. And I'm sure that's something that is playing into the thinking at each of your companies in terms of climate goals. How do those 2 issues, the energy crisis and climate concerns, how have those changed the way your companies approach energy?
Well, maybe I can start. As a carbon neutral company who work for carbon neutrality, we decided to stop coal about 6 years ago, and everybody was looking at us saying, why are you doing that? So we stopped coal. We are very proud of that. And today we see that even in Germany, things are moving. In Germany, as you read the papers, have extended 3 units of their nuclear fleet. And clearly, regarding carbon neutrality, if you want to meet by 2070, carbon neutrality in Europe, you have no other choices. No? You have to produce a lot of hydrogen. Electrical cars are moving fast in Europe. So how can you produce electricity, carbon neutrality, and to make the fit with the two? So renewable, yes, it's a must, but it's intermittent. In order to compensate the intermittence and to add the hydrogen equation and the gas equation with the grid, there is no other choice. You have to have the combination of the four technologies and not to oppose the four, which is today still an issue in Europe, not only in Europe, by the way, it's also an issue in other regions in the world. And Canada, and you can be proud of that, has taken its future in hand in putting the dogma away and put the pragmatism in front. And in Belgium, we are quite pragmatic as in Canada, so we need to find clearly the right mix for that in Europe as well.
And building on that, decarbonization, yes, but also energy security. And what we can see in the renewable energy sector, and especially in offshore wind, definitely the growth in the coming years will be driven by energy security and energy independency. We've seen in the last months, since the war started, that each member state, almost each member state, and the EU released a lot of packages and rules and roadmaps to accelerate the development of energy, renewable energies. And for offshore wind, the targets are enormous. It's great. The industry is very happy because we see lots of opportunities, but behind all these numbers and targets, we need actions. And we need actions, we need credible intermediate targets to allow us to actually develop these offshore wind farms. It takes almost 6-8 years, depending where you are, or even over 10 years if you're in France or Italy. So it takes time. And it's good to have 300 gigawatts by 2050 in Europe, but yes, it's in 30 years. It's long term. Yes, again, making this link between Canada and EU, a lot of discussions are accelerated in Canada right now, a lot of discussions on offshore wind. And there is no offshore wind actually in Canada right now, and because there was no need. There was not so many electricity demand on the East Coast, but there's a lot of land and there's a lot of wind. So now for Northland, for companies like ours, it's about bringing back our experience, being involved in all these discussions back home. Also on hydrogen, I think everywhere the discussions about hydrogen accelerated. Sometimes it's kind of a keyword, and again, we need to put real actions behind that. But we see a strong political will and a lot of synergies with all the companies like ours.
Thanks. And sorry, Jorge, before you go ahead, I just wanted to ask in terms of, in Europe, I think there have been a lot of conversations about speeding up permitting and how important that would be to reach those goals for renewable energy. Are you optimistic that that will have an impact in terms of what Europe has said it wants to do?
Right now, I'm very optimistic as I've seen that the EU will release some new law, some new regulation in the coming days, and also on permitting. But it takes time, and the devil is in the details. And sometimes we see this very nice, enthusiastic political speeches, and again the targets and EU level. But then you need to implement it on the member states level, and sometimes there are different interests, there are elections, there are a lot of stakeholders around the table, and to actually have the right decisions, in our opinion, to move faster, sometimes you need to continue discussing a lot.
So, yes, thank you. So, building on the question you mentioned about the security of supply and definitely, I think we are, our countries, our companies, we are all committed to the decarbonization, and that's a target that I think we cannot stop, and we should be working for that, and we are all working for that. The question comes to do it in an orderly manner. And I think I'm coming back to the point from Denis. So there are changes in the paradigms, like this war in Ukraine related to gas, or others that may happen in the coming future. So at the end of the day, we tend to see this as a balance between those targets for decarbonization that all our companies are working on. We're coming from the oil and gas industry, and we have a strong hydrogen division, e-fuels. So, and you're coming from the nuclear, and obviously this is now a green energy, and you're in the renewables. So we're targeting that. But while that is a reality, an economic reality, we also have to provide with security of energy supply to our countries. And here is when we have to do this in an orderly manner. So as we are promoting renewables and low carbons, we should also be promoting and helping these initiatives which may provide security of supply, while this can happen, because the targets, the timing for doing that may change due to the accidents that are in the path for that.
Thanks. And Jorge, I'll put this next question to you. Can you speak to the role, and I think you've touched on this already in terms of where LNG from Canada fits into Repsol's business plans, but can you just speak to the role of Canada when in Repsol's business?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we are present in Canada since many years ago, and our Brugas facility, which is providing security of supply for Atlantic Canada and Northeast US, is up and running since 2009. We went through some corporate operation mergers with Talisman, former Talisman company, so we have a strong presence in Canada. And we have our gas resources, let's say upstream positions across North America, including Canada. We're conceiving this project as well in order to monetize these Canadian gas resources or resources from other parts from North America into the European market. So for us, Canada is a very relevant country in terms of business. And I have to say, and it is true, that it's a very reliable country. Although, so you may have more complex or less complex regulations, and I'm coming also from a decentralized country, okay? But that's one thing, and but what I'm talking is about reliability, the stability of the regulations, the reliability of a country, and for me, Canada is in the top one.
Thanks. And Denis, similar question for you. I think Tractebel opened an office in Canada recently, within the last year. Why, and where does Canada fit in for Tractebel?
Yeah, for three reasons. First of all, the Canadian, let's say, SMR world is paving. Better like that? No. No?
Mine is working.
Okay, that's better. So for three reasons. I have something which is disturbing, I don't know. So for three reasons. The first reason was that clearly SMR in Canada is paving the way, and so Canada is the front runner, according to us. To pave the way and also to make the link with Europe to accelerate this SMR world. So first of all. The second reason is that Canada is a small and big country, so a very pragmatic country with very result-oriented mindset, and so for us it was a country to be, it's a place to be regarding that world of SMR and hydrogen. So Tractebel is very proud to be there. We are in Toronto for the time being, and we intend to continue our development. And the third reason for which we are in Canada is that the supply chain link between Canada and Europe is very strong. There are a very huge historical link between the two. Europe and Canada are strongly linked, and clearly there is a big upside to do regarding the supply chain. So in both directions, we could benefit from each other. And this is the reason for which we have decided to go in Canada, provided also that Tractebel can bring all this expertise from Europe, because we are very active in 4 technologies, as I said, in Europe, and making the link between the two is beneficial for Europe and beneficial for Canada. So these are the 3 reasons for which we are there, and we will continue to invest a lot there with locals.
Thanks. And Bénédicte, you were speaking to, I think, what the company can learn in Canada in terms of wind production and possibly offshore wind from the experience in Europe. Can you just speak to that a little bit more? What can, I mean, I guess more broadly, what can Canada learn from what Europe has done so far in offshore wind?
So, as I mentioned, the North Sea is a major market, so meaning Germany, Denmark, and then the Scandinavian country. They went through a lot of process of establishing an Offshore Wind Act, how to build a market, an action design, permitting, what kind of offtake, and all this question from allocated sites to operating and all the grid connections, all these topics, which are not small topics. They have 30 years of experience, so I think we don't have the time actually to reinvent the wheel, and we need to leverage the experience of other countries who actually made bad and good experience, and try to take the best of it. So it can be Germany, but not everything is perfect in Germany, and they just made a review of the Offshore Wind Act, and Germany also got some inspiration from UK, because UK is also a well-established market in terms of offshore wind. So I think this kind of experience, very concrete experience of a developer and operator of offshore wind farm, it is what we can bring back and discuss with authorities, decision makers, and bring that to the table. And there are not only Northland doing that. A lot of Canadian decision makers, or from the different provinces, from Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Ontario, came actually to Germany, but not only, also in Europe. And I think most of the trade commissioners here had a lot of Canadian delegations coming to Europe to discuss different energy sources, but also offshore wind, and how they can learn from each other. There will be so much competition, or there could be so much competition between the different countries in the coming years because of the high targets, that instead of competition, we really need collaboration between the countries. We need supply chain, we need materials, we need people. And in my sector, actually, there is not enough people. So you can't build offshore wind farms in a very short time. So you really need to consider that on a regional level, but also on a global level. And it's our part as an industry to do that, but also the part of governments.
Thanks. I'm wondering that this one's for all of you, and I'll let you decide who would like to tackle it first. But bringing us back to the energy crisis and the concerns about Europe's supply of energy, I'm wondering what you think broadly energy companies should be thinking about right now for I guess both the short term and the long term, or however you'd like to address that. What should be on the minds of people who are making these decisions?
Very good question. So in the energy companies, we always have to look at the long run, okay, and have a strategic plan, and we have to be flexible to adapt our short-term plans tactically to the things that happen in the market. So. Sorry if I'm repeating part of what I mentioned before, but if I'm talking about my company, probably many of the companies in here, we are all very committed to the renewables, with the low emissions, with the e-fuels, on decarbonizing the planet. And we are strongly convinced that we need to work on that. But having said that, in parallel, we have to deal with the energy needs in our world. So we need to provide the society with their needs of energy, and we have to work with that on transitioning. And let me take, for example, the gas, which is my business, by the way. If you take the fossil fuels, the gas is always meant to be the transition fuel because it's the less polluting one. So we have to promote that the shift to the renewables goes through gas while we don't have enough renewables and low carbon sources of supply. And this means investing at risk for the long-term commitments on renewables. We all know that some projects related to low carbon, at least in the European Union, they rely very much on helps and on financing. So from our perspective, we have to invest at risk in that in order to be ready to go through our learning curve and provide cost-efficient solutions in the long run. And while that happens, we have to fund that, and we have to provide the services that the society is needing. So I think with both the private companies and the countries and European Union, we have to really think on what's the best manner to achieve the target and what's the best manner to do the path.
So, supporting what you said, we have to be courageous. In front of us, there is a big challenge of security of supply, but also of price of electricity. So, having said that, it's very simple. So, two points I would like to address. So, first of all, we need to decarbonize. So, it needs courage from all the actors, and in particular, the electro-intensive. So, we have to bring a solution to the companies who are in Europe, who are in Canada, and to bring them a solution to decarbonize the industry and to listen to their needs. So it's a big change in the way we approach, let's say, the way to address the electricity. In the past, electricity was driven top-down. Today, it's driven from the bottom. You can install solar panels in your house if you want, and you push power into the system where it was not possible in the past. So we need to decarbonize the industry, to listen to the industrials, and if we want to maintain an industry, an industrialization in Europe, we need clearly to address electricity equation in integrating all the 4 technologies I just mentioned, and not only addressing gas versus renewable versus nuclear versus hydrogen. All these equations are, of course, linked, and I don't speak about, of course, the networks which need to follow and to be integrated in this equation at a price which is acceptable to us, acceptable to industrials, and acceptable to the people which are suffering today.
Yeah, and just building on that, and I will not repeat what you just said. Also, having the courage to have the networks to follow. This is a very important point, and also all infrastructure to help us developing all the alternative sources, or to help us allowing exporting clean energy from Canada to Europe. So it's also our role, but not only ours.
Thanks so much, all 3 of you. I'd love to, if there are a couple of questions, maybe we can try to get in 1 or 2 before we run out of time. And I see a hand right there. Maybe I can pass you my microphone. Oh. Okay, you have a microphone coming.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, thank you very much. You talked about wind, about gas, about hydrogen, nuclear, and at the same time, and you said it in your conclusion, sir, you have lots and lots of people that are putting solar panels to their houses, and they're overusing the electricity because they do not want to pay to push that electricity back into the grid. And so for me, there's a solution that is not yet really thought of, and it's to simply change the business model, to rethink how electricity has been done, and not only, maybe it's a price thing, you know, why should they pay if they give you electricity? I'm not an expert, I'm sure there's a reason, but also I think there's a real opportunity in microgrids. Microgrids are not only a potential new service, you know, with consulting, with setup or whatever, but it's also a way to empower people, to make them more responsible, but also to kind of, you know, absorb part of that big demand that there is in electricity, and that is more to come with Industry 4.0. So are you, as a businesses and as an industry, looking at microgrids as another one of those technology or opportunities that could be leveraged? Thank you.
Thanks. Would any of you like to take that?
Yes, I think all the companies are looking at this kind of distributed production sorry, but it comes also to some efficiency policies that need to be in place, and they are in place since many times. And since the crisis of the 70s, in which we discovered that cars which were consuming 20 liters per 100 kilometers were not, and we were working on that. I think all the companies in the energy sector, both in the energy, in the oil and the gas, we are working towards providing with more efficiency, less use of energy unit per consumption per unit, sorry. So, and I think that path is, in the coming days, is a complementary, obviously, to securing additional sources of supply, how we can lower the per capita consumption, being more efficient, that's in our DNA as well. So at least from my company, and I think in yours and from many companies I know in the sector, we are working on that. And if you look at the figures, you see a pattern from, at least in Europe and in Canada as well. So I don't know if I answered your question or more or less. Okay, that was my target. Okay, thank you.
Maybe we can take another question if that's okay with everybody up here. So, yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I was interested, my name is Andy Vermout, I'm the president of the World Council for Public Diplomacy and Community Dialogue, and I was interested to know more about the small modular reactors. What would be the capacity of this, and is this feasible also for Belgium? Because we also have here a big energy crisis, also with nuclear centrals are going to shut down more and more in the future. And also, is it also with thorium? I also heard about the thorium centrals, also a sort of a part of a solution. Is this also fueled with thorium, or how are they fueled? Because this is a really important discussion.
So, several questions in your question, but I will try to answer the best. So, first of all, small modular reactors are going from 5 megawatts to roughly 300 megawatts. So you can see the replacement of a coal power plant by a small modular reactor without any issue. So this is clearly one point. So 300 megawatts, it's something quite huge. First point. Second, so this is the target for today of the generation 3, what we call the generation 3. A lot of technologies are put on the table today, and clearly, if you look to the schedule, the first wave will be 2028. OPG Canada first on the grid until to 2034 something. The second wave, generation 4, will arrive, according to us, by 2035, 2040. Generation 4, we speak about plomb bismuth, we speak well-known technology in Belgium, we speak about molten salt, we'll speak about a lot of technologies of generation 4. And yes, for Belgium, you can address SMR world, on the condition that some laws are modified, and this is something which is on the table today, And you know that for Belgium, for today, 100 million euro is spent by the government to invest in SMRs. So the answer is fully yes. If the French government, the Polish, Estonian, UK, Czech Republic, Romania, Netherlands, I will stop there. Except Belgium, we are capable of doing that as well.
Thank you oh, sorry.
And to complete the answer, I think that Canada can give the example and the tempo for Europe.
Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry to have to cut it off here. We're a little bit, we went just a little bit longer. I hope it was worthwhile for everyone. Thank you so much to our three panelists. I hope everyone enjoys the evening. Thanks.